Good morning. If everyone could take their seats, please. We'll get started. How's everybody doing? Welcome to El Segundo. Anyone missing a wallet? Leave their wallet here by chance? Oh, okay, bad joke. Anyway, Tribe Called Quest. Some of you are old enough like me to remember that song. Don't pretend you're not. But we want to welcome you to El Segundo. It's a pleasure to have all the mayors here. Esteemed guests, thank you very much for coming from your cities. We also have our city council here. I'm going to introduce each one of them. We have Dr. Don Brand, city council member for El Segundo. Councilman Chris Pimentel, former Marine officer. Once a Marine, always a Marine, right? Best part of the Navy? No. I'm Navy as well. Mayor Pro Tem Carol Perstuck. Councilman Scott Nickel. And then we have City Manager Greg Carpenter. Thank you for the love. So it really is an honor, and I went to these. I was fortunate enough when I was Mayor Pro Tem to go to the one that was hosted in Arcadia. It was great. I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could bring the mayors to El Segundo? And if we leave you with anything today, after we have our panel discussions, we're going to have a great panel with some esteemed members of our Economic Development Advisory Council, something that we think is fairly unique to El Segundo. Once we go through that and the different topics that Mayor Garcetti has on the agenda, we want to leave you with the impression that this might be some of the most important 5 square miles in LA County. No offense to all of you, but one stat I want to leave you with is this, and I think some of you know this. 16,000 residents in El Segundo in a 2 square mile area. 75,000 to 80,000 every day based on daytime population, people coming in this incredible employment hub that we call El Segundo. So 5 square miles, 2 square miles of that are a refinery. That leaves us with 3 square miles left, 1 of which is residential, 2 is just commercial. So an important little town, small but mighty, we like to call ourselves, and we've got a short litc video. Barbara, you here? Deputy City Manager, formerly with LAEDC. Want to play that, and then I'll introduce the mayor? Great.
El Segundo is a unique town. We're 5 square miles. 2 of those square miles are residential, really quaint neighborhoods, remind you more of like a Midwest kind of town, small town feel, surrounded by about 3 square miles of industry.
We chose El Segundo because of the proximity. You know, you've got the 105 freeway, the 405 freeway, LAX, you have a metro station here.
One of the reasons that we were so excited about our project at the former Northwood facility, it just sits right on 2 of those metro rail lines.
The physical location of El Segundo, when you look at it, is really the new hub, the new energy. Everybody can feel this new energy, not just in El Segundo, but in the South City. So we are truly the next Silicon Beach, and I think the truth of the matter, we are there already.
We've always been known as an aerospace and somewhat industrial community, but we're now known for a thriving place of business where entrepreneurs are locating, where companies want to be.
We're in an area called Smoky Hollow, which is a rapidly evolving area of El Segundo. It's got 1940s era rusty Quonset huts that are rapidly turning into creative office spaces. El Segundo is this like kind of last undiscovered gem of West Los Angeles.
The Smoky Hollow area has really come on. It's kind of a maker's alley, if you will. That's also taken on a lot of personality. So I think there's just a lot of personality that's really fun about El Segundo.
We doubled in size within the first year. The value of the real estate we purchased has gone up significantly. I wish we had bought more real estate 3 years ago. I don't see us moving out of El Segundo. I just see us moving into bigger spaces here.
I closed the transaction with LA Times in March. In 5 months, we built this most modernized newsroom, interconnected, and as you could see, this magnificent sign. I don't think we could have done this with any other city.
We're seeing a lot in technology and media right now. So they want to be in great locations. They want to have places where people want to be. And El Segundo fits that bill.
Working with them on the building and permits and inspections, and the police force, the fire department, we're right next door to a fire station. They've been fantastic. El Segundo is a well-known community, but it's really like a little hometown, and everybody looks out for each other.
I think it's really a can-do sort of attitude. Their logo speaks for itself, right? So really the idea of bringing big ideas to the city, they really mean it.
You know, El Segundo has so much going on, kind of like the Lakers. We have so much to look forward to, but not forgetting what made us great to begin with.
All right, thank you for the video and for watching that video. And it's now my pleasure to bring the man up that needs no introduction, Mayor Garcetti. And one thing I learned today, he's doing a lot, very innovative ideas. We pride ourselves, El Segundo is a town where big ideas take off. All those big ideas are certainly taken off in the city of LA. Homelessness, huge measures there that have been successful. Reinventing transportation. And the one stat that I remember from earlier today that I didn't know is that doubled the capacity for homeless housing recently in the last 12 months or something. So let's give him a round of applause for that alone. Thank you. So Mayor Garcetti, thank you again for hosting this event, and we look forward to the rest of the morning. Yeah.
Let's give it up for Drew. Come on. I was like, I think I saw him in that video, but he needs to shave in the video, right? That's a little different. And thank you to the city council members as well for hosting us and for having us. We've been working a lot as a group on El Segundo over the years. It's something that the regional convening of mayors has brought up and talked about. LA Air Force Base was something that we were all came together to make sure proactively this time was kept here. And this is just such a powerhouse of a city for our county. And so thank you for hosting us. Thank you to Mayor and to the members of the city council, to all the city staff as well who are here. And thank you to the mayors who've taken time out of your lives to be here. There's always some new mayors, and we're going to go to introductions in a moment. But this was really born out of a simple idea that we all, while we're very proud of our individual cities, live in one town. And it's bigger even than LA County these days. It's 18 million people. It's the third largest municipal economy in the world after Tokyo and New York. And watch out, New York, we're almost the size in terms of GDP, or GMP as I call it, gross municipal product of New York. And we're in the cities of the world, the mega cities of the world, only 22nd in population. So if you put together that we're third most productive and 22nd in population, we're the most productive per person mega city in the world right now. And that so many of the problems that we have cut across our borders. We can learn things from each other, no matter how big we are or how small we are. We can learn something and we can contribute something. And so this is the 15th convening we've done, almost every quarter since I've been mayor, and we've gone all over. We have a list, I think, of all the cities we've gone to in the past. I'll just give them shouts out because I know everybody's always like, well, can you come to my city? So we've been in Los Angeles, we've been in Monterey Park, we've been in Downey, in Culver City, in Santa Clarita, in Long Beach, in Burbank, in Cudahy, in Arcadia, in Inglewood, in Santa Monica, and now here. And as always, if you're interested in hosting the next one, let us know. Let Gail Koretz, who, if you haven't met her, Gail, stand up for a minute. I want to thank her and her team who worked so hard to make this happen. As the biggest city, we decided it was our obligation to take our resources and make sure this thing was staffed always. But really, it's just the work of so many that makes this happen. And we love this city because LA lays out at nighttime like a bed of jewels, but there's nothing that says I'm home like when you look out the window and you can see El Segundo as you land at LAX. And know that you truly are home. And a special shout out to Barbara. Where did Barbara go? Barbara Voss. Oh, there you are. Barbara, the city manager as well. I want to thank you and Megan for the work that you both did to make this happen as well. And thanks to Cross Campus, which is just an awesome place to come to. I've known the one in Santa Monica when we started, and then downtown and here. And it's really exciting to be in such a dynamic space. I think all of us that work in government always get jealous when we go into private sector spaces. We're like, why can't we make city halls like this? But I tried to do that at LA City Hall because I counted that there are 9 doors between the public and my office, which is a kind of a symbol of how far away I felt sometimes from folks. But they said it was a historic cultural monument, so I couldn't knock down any walls. So I just hang out in my city and see the people at the grocery store and all the things that mayors do. I don't know if you guys saw in the midst of the hearings on Kavanaugh hearings, and remember when Senator Flake, somebody at the elevator confronted him about her experience as a survivor, a Me Too survivor. And there was a panel of mayors that were asked the next day. It was in New Orleans, and my good friend Mitch Landrieu, who was a former mayor of New Orleans, was on the panel, and they said, wow, wasn't that intense? DC politics is just like so intense. And he said, for mayor, that's like 8 conversations on the way to get milk at the market. Like, we know what intense conversations are like every single day, and passionate feelings, whether it's about a park, whether it's about a pothole, whether it's about people. But some of the things we're going to talk about today are even more, are deeper than that. They're about our survival. And so we start usually with introductions, so why don't we do that and go around, and please just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and your name, and we'll start over here with Fred. Sorry, I got you mid-bite, Fred.
Fred Gaines, Mayor of the City of Calabasas.
David Shapiro, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Calabasas.
Jack Aginian, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Montebello.
Newly married since the last meeting.
Congratulations. Joe Vinatieri, City of Whittier.
I'm Barbara Voss, Deputy City Manager for the City of El Segundo.
Good morning. I'm Al Kiahi, the Chair of the Economic Development Advisory Commission for El Segundo.
Mike Mothner, I'm an entrepreneur in El Segundo and also on the EDAC committee.
Jeff Rizzo, Councilman, City of Torrance.
François Chopard, Starburst, El Segundo.
I'm Greg Good, Chief of Legislative and External Affairs for Mayor Garcetti.
Ned Davis, Mayor of City of Westlake Village.
I'm Larry Weber, City Councilman of Hidden Hills, and I'd just like to thank the City of El Segundo, because back in the 1950s and 60s, my father's very large family was about 2/3 employed here in the City of El Segundo, either at Standard Oil or Air Research.
Good morning, Terry Tornick, Mayor, City of Pasadena.
Good morning, Zara Sinanian, Mayor of Glendale, California.
Good morning, Sean Ashton, Mayor for the City of Downey.
Hi, Drew Boyles, Mayor, City of El Segundo.
Good morning, Bill Whalen, Police Chief, El Segundo.
Rick Mullen, Mayor of the City of Malibu.
Laura Rosenthal, Council Member, City of Malibu.
Don Brand, City Council Member here in El Segundo.
Good morning, Chris Pimentel, City Councilman here in El Segundo.
Carol Perstick, Mayor Pro Tem, El Segundo.
Scott Nichols, City Council Member, City of El Segundo.
Greg Carpenter, City Manager, City of El Segundo.
Thank you. John Cruikshank, Mayor Pro Tem, Rancho Palos Verdes, and also a proud El Segundo High School graduate.
Thomas Small, Mayor of Culver City. Nice to see my friends Patrick Soon-Chung and Michael Hackman in your movie.
Britt Huff, Mayor of Rolling Hills Estates on Palos Verdes Peninsula.
Pat Wilson, Mayor of Rolling Hills, also Palos Verdes Peninsula.
Betty Lynn Peterson, City of Palos Verdes Estates, also on the Palos Verdes Peninsula.
Did you all carpool together?
Good morning, Steve Napolitano, Mayor for the City of Manhattan Beach.
Good morning, everyone. Emily Gabel-Luddy, Mayor of Burbank.
Good morning, Vanis Babodi, Starburst co-founder, and welcome to our home and office here.
Richard Angel, Mayor Pro Tem, City of South El Monte.
Gloria Olmos, Mayor of South El Monte.
Sally Flowers, Mayor of City of Artesia.
Buenos dias, Jorge Morales, City of Southgate.
Morning, everybody. Bill Brand, Mayor of Redondo Beach.
Oops. Good morning. My name is Shote from the beautiful city of Arcadia.
Greg Morena, Council Member, Santa Monica.
Excellent. Did we miss anybody? We're all good? All right. So let me run down what we're going to be talking about today. As always, just so you know, if you're new to this, this agenda is yours. We don't come up with it. We come up with it kind of collectively. So if there's a topic that you want to present on, we always try to learn something about the place that we're at. So you'll hear about El Segundo in a moment, but it's really up to all of us. So if there's something on your mind, the state's doing something terrible to the cities, there's an issue that we want to lobby up in Sacramento or DC about, something local that we can come together about, this is your agenda. So as always, we had suggestions from folks, and we have 3 topics for today that we'll be talking about. So let me run through the agenda. First, we're going to start with a lessons learned panel discussion about the recent Woolsey fire. I think all of us know what that impact was, but a few of us really felt that impact, and most deeply in Malibu. So we've asked Malibu Mayor Rick Mullen, our County Fire Chief Darrell Osby, and LA City Fire Chief Ralph Terrazas to kind of be part of a panel discussion and try to figure out what lessons learned, because we're all close to some place that can burn or that has burned. What lessons about coordination can we continue to build on? What did we figure out from that? We had an area footprint that obviously crossed over county lines too, but there was a footprint the size of the city of Denver that burned. And what do we do to recover from that as well? So that's going to be our first panel and our first topic. After that, we're going to ask Mayor Boyles to come forward again and to lead a panel looking at El Segundo's economic development and its impact on the regional economy. And we saw a lot of that in the movie, but getting kind of deeper into how do we do that and how do we support that across our city lines for one another. And then our third and final panel will discuss something we've discussed a couple of times with the regional convening, which is earthquakes. We've had Dr. Lucy here back in the day when we were talking about work that now a number of cities have done. And if you haven't done it, please feel free to talk to Santa Monica, LA, other cities that have looked at the soft story buildings that are very vulnerable that we're now retrofitting, and some of the also the concrete buildings that can collapse and really kill the most people. But this is a slightly better and hopefully rosier presentation today, which is about looking at earthquake early warning and the technology partnership that we have to have an app to actually give people notice before an earthquake occurs here in the Southland. The work that we've been doing with the federal government and state to make sure we have those sensors and really be the first in the country to have that capacity. And then what we're going to do in our cities to apply that to things like buildings so that elevators can stop, and our metro system so that trains can stop, and things like that before an earthquake happens as well. Really quick before the first one, I always try to do a quick update on a few things that we've all been working on. We talked last time, obviously, about SB1. The election, if you liked those dollars coming to your city, was a good one, in that the Proposition 6 was defeated, and that was, thank you for everybody for your activism around that. Also, water, we've talked a lot. We went to Culver City, actually, to talk about water first a few years ago, and the burden of the Clean Water Act on a lot of cities trying to meet their requirements for clean water. And the county measure did pass, and I think it's going to be important for this group to continue to chime in with our county supervisors, who are always invited to this meeting, by the way, because they're the 5 additional mayors when you look at the unincorporated areas, and we always just invite them so they can see some of their cities. But we want to make sure that we're guiding those dollars distributed to cities, so we're still on the hook legally for those dollars, but now at least there's going to be a permanent funding source to help address some of those concerns. So maybe we can invite folks to come later to tell us how that money will be distributed and how some of those rules, which we helped shape this group, were written, but now that that's passed with a 2/3 vote. We also have been very active with film tax credits. They were renewed since we met last time for an additional 5 years starting next year. But I've spoken with the governor-elect and members of the legislature about whether or not we might be able to try to double the tax credit again. Remember when we first took this up as a group, it was $100 million a year. It's now $330 million a year. But when you look at places like Georgia that have over $600 million a year, or places like Canada where there's no cap at all, I really proposed to the governor, do you want to be the guy who just stemmed the bleeding, which is thankfully what Governor Brown did, or the guy who brings the entire industry back? And the video showed it, but Amazon, Apple, Netflix, they're making huge decisions on where to build studios and to put the next 20 years of production, and it's such an important industry for all of us. I think we can go back to the legislature with a new governor, because it doesn't start till next year, the extension, and maybe look at even doubling the $330 million. So something to flag for later. And then on homelessness, which we've all talked a lot about too, I was part of a group of what was called the Big 11. It's now the Big 13, and probably will continue to expand. But of the biggest city mayors in the state, that we went up and got sponsorship for the state to start to chip in on the homelessness problem, because there really was no state money over the last 4 or 5 years. Convinced the governor to do it. We initially asked for $1.5 billion, which we knew was shooting for the stars, but with a $9 billion surplus at the state level, we said, this is the perfect year to do it, and we wound up getting $500 million for cities, all the cities of California. It's in 2 buckets. The bucket that is relevant to everybody else in here, there's $81 million that will be at LAHSA. There will be some direct money for cities like Pasadena, I believe, and Long Beach that have their own continuum of care, but for the rest of the cities, and the city of LA has some too, but for the other 85 cities, through the Homeless Services Authority, there is going to be money available for cities to actually partner. It's $81 million. So we can try to get more information or have LAHSA come forward. They haven't even begun to put out the regulations for that. We got a separate $85 million check, which was very funny. I've never seen an $85 million paper check, but it's still a paper check. And I got to touch it and hold it, and we spent it the next day, the first $3 million of that, because there's such a need for addressing homelessness, and that was a good news measure. This coming year, I think we want to push the state to continue to make that not just one time, but at least semi-permanent for the next few years while this battle's going on. So those are a few different updates. Let's go to our first presentation. And so, you know, a few of us mayors that were affected by the fires, I don't know how many of us, there are 8 or 9 mayors, went to, on a Monday night, for Monday Night Football, which returned to the Coliseum, the Rams, and I know everybody in here is a Rams fan, right? Yeah. Who? Chargers are like my second favorite team in town now, for sure. Raiders, you know, once they left, crime went down every single year, so that's probably good riddance. Sorry for any Raiders fans here, you know. Anybody a Raiders fan here? It's an interesting personality test. It's always, okay, so none of you are gangsters. All right, good. So, we went, and if you remember, we were going to actually have the first NFL game in Mexico. And the field was so bad because they had had a bunch of rains and stuff, it got canceled. And last minute, it was moved to the Coliseum for Monday Night Football. And it was a really beautiful evening because the Rams then opened up the tickets to first responders. And we had all sorts of firefighters, police officers, sheriff's deputies, and their families. The widow and son of the Ventura County Sheriff's Deputy who was killed, Sergeant Helis, were able to light the torch. And then all of us stood behind because they don't trust politicians to touch coins. And there's an NFL regulation that only the referee can flip the coin because we, you know, flip it for the Rams, of course. But the 8 of us were standing behind in kind of a show of solidarity of what we had been through. And it was a marvelous evening. It was one of those nights where if everybody thinks we're divided in this country, just the moment we need each other in times of suffering, we showed just how strong and how big this county and across the county, this region is. And I was really, really proud of that. And it was the best game we've ever seen in our entire lives, that the Rams won, and both teams, for the first time in an NFL game, had more than 50 points. That's a long way to say that we've been very blessed to have the strength of this region, but we certainly weren't untouched. And I know that the horror and the trauma that continues for so many residents in cities in this county and Ventura County are what we wanted to talk about. Not only did it burn an area the size of Denver, it displaced 250,000 people, and at least 1,500 structures, and I know that count is ongoing, were destroyed. Here, more than 300 were damaged and 3 lives were lost as well. But it would have been much worse if we hadn't come together as a region to help one another. I know while we had 30-something fire trucks, I think, that were on the line with the county mutual aid 10 task force, we had Orange County firefighters who came to staff our station so that when people had heart attacks or fires in our city, that they would be taken care of. But we know that when the flames subside, that's when the hard work continues as well. And so I'd like to ask our 3 folks to come forward, Mayor and the 2 chiefs, if you can come forward and take the stage. And I think, let me start by thanking our firefighters for what they did and give them a round of applause for the extraordinary heroism and work. From Castro Crest to Coral Canyon, around this area, we saw lives that were saved, property that was protected, and hope that was preserved. So I have a few questions to start, and then ask you to also jump in with questions you have. But the first one is really the most basic one, and maybe we can start with you, Mayor. What are the lessons learned from this experience that you, as a firefighter yourself, a fire captain, and somebody who wears two hats of knowing that experience as a firefighter, but also as a mayor of the city in LA County that was the most affected and the most devastated, what sort of lessons can you take out of this today?
Wow. Excuse me, can everybody hear me okay? No. How about that? Okay, good. Well, I certainly can't take all the lessons learned and try to cover them here today. So let me talk about some of the big ones. There are, and I wore two hats throughout this whole adventure. I was a actual fire captain engaged during the fire, pretty much the full time that the fire was there for most of 3 weeks. As I was also the mayor. And I didn't want to be the mayor who was nowhere to be seen, even though I was tactically engaged in and had a front row seat at everything that was going on, certainly during the fire. So the way I threaded that needle, and I did think, although it's not the same, but in a micro way, it was similar to 9/11. I kept thinking of Rudy Giuliani. He was engaged, he was seen. He used the media to help him get the word out to everybody, and I thought, I don't want to be the mayor who's nowhere to be seen, and how can I bridge those two worlds while I'm doing this one thing, and everyone's evacuated and they're on the outside. So I had my public information officer send to me all the media requests for interviews, and I did a lot of interviews. I got very comfortable doing interviews live on national television, and most of them were by telephone, and I wanted to convey to everybody an empathetic message, that I understood the stress they were going through as they were evacuated, trying to get back in, and have helped them to understand that there were certain considerations for safety and security and infrastructure reassembling that was keeping them out, but that I understood their frustration and that I was going to bat for them as much as I could. So there's leadership lessons tactically for me on the engine company level, but there's big leadership lessons that I was able to, I would say fairly successfully, not 100%, bridge both those worlds at the same time, because I wanted to get the word out to everybody. And fortunately, a lot of media companies were interested in helping me, and they afforded me a lot of time, and they still are, with all the mud and debris flow issues, to be the voice of the city leadership. Now, that's not to say that everything went perfectly, of course, in dealing with all the citizens that we had, and we had a city council meeting the other day where they let me know, loud and clear, that there were, in their view, there's a lot of deficiencies. So let me talk about some of the actual tactical things that the city is responsible for in terms of public safety. 1, life. 2, property. 3, environment. Okay, very fast-moving fire. Everybody knows that Malibu has brush fires, and I think you tend to look at things through the historical perspective. Well, the 93 fire was like this. Well, the 2007 Corral fire was like this. Those are, by comparison, those are sort of Malibu-only fires. This one started 30 miles away, and by the time it got to Malibu, it was the last stop for the train. It was 14 miles wide. It had already gone through a number of towns, many of whom have lost quite a few homes. I mean, before it got to the city of Malibu, in Sentimental Springs, they lost more than 100 trailers. In my particular district, which is outside of the city of Los Angeles, or the city of Malibu, 150 of my 240 residents in the sparsely populated Santa Monica Mountains were destroyed. So when it got to Malibu, it was already giant by scale. But the movement and the speed of the actual event, based on what we'd seen historically, was off the charts. Off the charts. So there's a lot of things that people have to kind of reassess as they look at this. These fires, which is very much like an earthquake, because it happens so quickly, is what I would describe as come as you are party. The idea that, oh, the fire's coming, let me get my affairs in order, let me do this, let me do that. You have to be ready. And that's not only the city, but individuals have to be ready. And that's a lesson that we are learning. We've learned, and our challenge will be, how do we educate our citizenry to be ready to go? Because this one showed that you don't really have all the time to sort out all your photo albums and this and that and the other thing. It's like, you gotta leave, and you gotta leave now. And we were quite successful, although some of my citizens would disagree with me about this, in taking care of that number one priority, which is life, okay? Partially, the reason we were successful is we actually established and practiced and ran drills for getting the reverse 911 calls out and the text messages and the emails from the city, and we'd had a number of dry runs in the recent months. Not everybody got them, and in some cases it was dependent on whether people signed up for those type of things. But I think in that regard, we got out the word fairly quickly. One of the big complaints about the actual evacuation itself, which there was a big traffic jam on PCH. And I would say that's an indictment of the fact that everybody got the message. Not everybody got the message, but that the message was largely successful in that it got out, and we moved a lot of people out of the way of the fire and took care of priority number one, which is life. So for all of you that are thinking about preparedness for earthquakes or an evacuation, if you're in an area where you might have a fire type of thing, I would recommend that you do that. Implement those practices, run those drills, test your system, make sure it's working well. Is ours working as well as it could be? Sure, we can make some improvements, and we will make some improvements, but we actually did do some drills before that.
Well, can I ask you something about that? And you or the chief, I mean, how did the notifications go out? And I don't know how many folks, maybe show of hands, have kind of a sign up for alerts system. So almost every city does. There's also the technologies that push out whether people have signed up or not by just kind of putting a ring around an area and pushing out through cell phones or other ways. Was the city in charge of that? Was the county in charge of that? Were you both doing that simultaneously? And which were the most successful ways? Was it the more passive, you don't have to have signed up push, or was it the ones that were folks that pulled you in because they'd signed up?
Well, I want to hog the mic here, Chief, so I'll let you answer.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. It's a combination of both. For the County of Los Angeles, the Office of Emergency Services has responsibility through the Sheriff's Office of pushing out the information either through text or through 911, reverse 911. And lessons learned, it wasn't 100%. So we got partial response from that perspective in relation to people getting the notice. The other success was just firefighters and law enforcement going door to door, or community telling people to evacuate. And the last thing is just the media. You know, a lot of people saw the fire in the media, and from my perspective, I would imagine Chief Terrasas would say the same thing, that if you live in a wildland interface area and it's a wind-driven fire, don't wait for us to tell you to evacuate. Leave early, because as was indicated by the mayor, in this situation, PCH, Interstate 10 was backed up, so we had to have all 4 lanes of PCH southbound going out and all 8 lanes of Interstate 10 eastbound, just to get people out in a timely manner.
So I mean, there's 3 ways, I guess. In person, you did that through a phone one way or another, and I guess you can put email in that, or through the media, all 3. Is there, I think for all of us, if we have a big disaster that we all face, whether it's an act of terrorism, whether it's going to be an earthquake, what would you say, Chief, are some of the lessons learned about how to better coordinate together? Because you had a lot of jurisdictions, I know, as well as you were working with somebody across county lines.
Yeah, well, the mayor took a lot of my speaking points, but that's okay. He's the mayor.
That's right.
Subordinate.
What mayors do, right?
That's what mayors do, right? But I think there's positives too, because the lessons learned from the positive perspective just really talks about relationships. And I'm sitting here with my counterpart from LA City, and the positives in relationships as lessons learned is that we can call one another and say, I need help. And generally speaking, when I need help, I can always rely on LA City to provide 4 strike teams, which is 20 engines. But in this particular situation, I said, I really need help. So he provided 10, which is 50 engines. So it's like, yeah, double past his capacity. I think also, too, in this situation and relationship is that we know chiefs up and down the state of California. So we actually got a phone call from the incident commanders from the Camp Fire. And unfortunately, they informed us, hey, this is unlike any type of fire behavior that we've seen. Evacuate early. Because early on, they told me, Chief Osby, we ordered 200 body bags. And we don't want the same thing to happen in your region. And so we placed emphasis on evacuations in multiple areas as sometimes the cost of losing structures. Because as articulated by the mayor, protection of life was our number one priority, and we didn't have the capacity to do all three: life, property, and environment. I think lessons learned, we're still going through a process. We did a closeout with the state, but we're going to hire a consultant to help us do an after-action review, which we do for major incidents. But definitely, we're going to look at our response. We're going to revisit mutual aid. In this particular situation, myself and LA City, we rely on Northern California helping us this time of the year. It's unprecedented that we have a fire in Southern California and Northern California this time of the year, but because of the weather conditions, I won't say climate change, the president might, because of we had a fire in Northern and Southern California, so we didn't get help from Northern California. So we need to revisit our capacity, revisit vegetative practices, construction practices, and then have a more comprehensive report after we get more of the facts.
Chief Justice,
Mayor,
jump in, and then I have a question for you, too.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to the alerting. We, for the first time in the city of LA, activated the WEA, Wireless Emergency Alert System. You may know it as the Amber Alert on your cell phone. I think when we're in that mode, you have to use all avenues of notification. And we're learning that you can geofence. Sometimes it's not going to stay exactly in that area, but you can create a square, and you can send the message. And that's another way, on top of the voluntary opt-in notification system and the media and law enforcement, to notify your constituents. And it worked well for us.
Is it your consensus that over-notification is better than under-notification? I mean, it's okay, because obviously we get pushback sometimes when we over-notify, like, oh, you told me and I thought I had to evacuate because they didn't maybe read carefully where it was, and suddenly their lives are disrupted, but probably better to have those complaints than the under-notification.
Absolutely. Think about the fires last year up north. Many people died without ever getting notification. I would rather over-notify than not. And the rationale then was that they didn't want to clog the escape routes.
Yep.
The reality was they weren't going to get clogged at that point. Fire trucks were still a great distance away. So I'm in favor of over-notification.
Chief Justice, you have, I know, in the city of LA, a fire index that kind of puts together heat and the humidity and the winds. What were the conditions like before, and historically, where did that rank in what you had seen?
The day that Woolsey Fire broke out, our brush index was 300. Last year, for the fires we had, the Creek Fire, Skirball Fire, the Thomas Fire, it was 266. And I don't know if you remember, Mayor, but I told you last year, I've never seen a number as high as 266. So when we saw 300, I've told my staff, okay, you have to recognize the outlier. This is not normal. We have to change our mentality here. And that caused us to staff our Department Operations Center to pre-deploy resources on the western edge of the valley. And when the fire broke out, we had a lot of resources in the vicinity.
I have one last question, then we can open it up to questions you have. I have other ones if people don't. But it may be too early, but Mayor, how does this make you rethink about rebuilding Malibu, where people are going to be, how people should build, what sort of infrastructure? Now that so much has been burned down, what will rise from those ashes, and what does it make you think about as a mayor about how you plan for your city's future?
Excellent question. And let's turn the Wayback Machine to the 1950s. We had the 1956 fire. And if you look at all the changes that have gone on since that time through the 60s and the 70s and up until this point, there have been a lot of changes. And there have been sort of variables in that algebraic equation of survivability of the home. And after all of those big fires, lessons were learned, policies were implemented, brush clearance procedures, the way homes are constructed, and the lessons learned on this one will definitely be captured. And I think we do need to look at those things of what type of construction, how can we harden the structure and prepare it. We know it. We know a lot of the things, and we know more from this fire, and we need to capture them and implement them and take them seriously. So from this point forward, we've pledged to expedite everyone's ability to rebuild as it was before. That doesn't mean we're going to take that 1963 shake shingle roof house and make it exactly like it was. It's going to be the same size, maybe a little bigger, but we have to be very serious about what it's made of, how you've arranged your foliage, what's on the ground, get rid of all those flammable things, where the fire department maybe in the past has been tolerant of things like creosote logs for your landscaping. That stuff's got to be no-go. And we have to really, when me as an inspector going out there used to give advice on certain things, I think we probably need to consider being a lot more ardent in our direction to people to remove things that are going to put their home at risk when nobody's there in a fire like this.
Questions from other mayors? Yeah, Tom.
Hi, I'm Thomas Small, Mayor of Culver City. We are just beginning the update of our general plan next year. We're about to select the consultant next month. And
There's a mic if you want.
And as I'm sure you know, we have a superb fire department in Culver City. What should I be asking the chief in regard to planning? Exactly like what you were saying, but even on a larger scale, how should we be looking at land use in our city, and how the city should envision itself in larger strokes, going forward, not just for fires, but also for earthquakes and other sorts of emergencies?
Great question, and I'll get back to my previous comment that it's a come-as-you-are party. There's an earthquake is a great example of that. Everyone has to be ready like that. There's no time to prepare. In this fire, we had a bunch of people who stayed behind and defended their homes or whatever, and then they had to account for their own survival with food, etc. Very much like an earthquake scenario. So it's something, when you talk about what you're going to ask your fire departments to do, I think you need to look at, Culver City is a little different because it's not sort of a brush interface like Malibu is, and your considerations are different. And I'll defer to my professionals next to me. But I think the idea that, oh, hey, there's something bad on the horizon and we're going to have a few hours to get our act together, whether it's a fast-moving fire like this or an earthquake, everyone has to be ready at all times, because earthquakes are not some exotic thing that doesn't happen in Los Angeles. They're a big threat, and it could happen at any time. And that's really much bigger than even this event.
Yeah, I would suggest that for new development to really look at your plan. I know in the county of Los Angeles, the major players are the fire, public works, and a redevelopment. And especially for people that are in the interface communities. I mean, Culver City does have some interface from the backside coming from the county, is that if you're going to build in an area like that, to really look at land use, there's going to be significant lessons learned from here. I would say in addition to brush clearance in certain areas, also ornamental fuels in your own landscape. I was out there and people's landscape was burning. We actually had a fire probably 25 years ago in Baldwin Park where it wasn't in brush, it was a paper fire, and the brands of paper actually got into the community and started burning people's landscape, and we lost 29 homes. So I think we really need to look at people's landscape, land use, and construction features. And also what's downplayed that the mayor mentioned is that wherever you live, it's important. I know they do the same thing in LA City. Wherever you live, if it's by earthquake fault or wildland interface area, practice drills, talk about these things in advance. The time to discuss it is not during an incident. And I think that was part of the complexity with this incident.
I'd like to add on to that, just broader than just a brush fire. I would ask your political body, what type of response times do you want in your city? That's going to dictate the number of fire stations. That is one metric. The other metric is, what are the risks in your city? If you have refineries, you're going to need more trucks and more hazardous material squads. If you're in a brush area, you're going to need more specialized brush resources. So the two things that I see when I look at various plans are response times and assessment of risk.
You know,
Go ahead.
I just want to make one comment
Go ahead,
here
please.
about readiness in general. And it's not exactly what your question is, but it's something I have to think about because the actual citizenry itself needs to kind of be educated on their own sort of responsibilities on their personal readiness. And everybody comes to Malibu, thinks it's a lovely place, but it's a dangerous place. And they think they assume the risk, but they don't really understand the risks. And I think this fire illuminated everybody the risks that we all have at all times. And all those things like CERT classes and stuff, and having some basic survival things is very important, and it will be important in the 5 days after a big event. And an earthquake is in the back of my mind as the backdrop. This is like a training evolution for a big earthquake for Los Angeles. It could be catastrophic, really.
And at Calabasas, Hidden Hills, I know that both were a huge part of this too, so feel free to share any of your lessons.
Thank you, Mayor. So first of all, some of the good things, probably I think maybe the most successful thing we do in local government is mutual aid. It is amazing. I want to thank all of these cities. Culver City, you were on my street in Calabasas. I appreciate it. But the instantaneous deployment of those resources is amazing. Second is brush clearance. If you take an aerial photo of Calabasas today, you would see the fire burn up to the brush clearance line 99% of the way around the city. Yep. Even in this fire, which was beyond anything we've seen in terms of the winds and the low humidity, the size of the embers, the distance the embers could fly, that's still the case. 99% of the city, you'll see a black ring right up to the brush clearance line. And third, the importance of evacuation early. You cannot be successful in an evacuation in the middle of the night. You just can't. Once people have sort of turned in for the night, you'll get participation, but you won't get anywhere near the participation. And so if you have to make the decision, and of course the chiefs are making the decision, but if you have to implement that, you want to do it before bedtime. And even if that means you've taken people out of the house on a night where they'll come back and tell you that they shouldn't have been out of the house. But then you do have to expect stuff that you didn't expect. For example, we had a couple hundred people sleep in their cars, go to the shopping center and park their car and sleep in the cars. Something we hadn't thought about. They need.
We experienced that in the shelters that we set up in the city, because a lot of people, the shelters, and this is just something for people to consider, didn't have lockers or anything, and they took their valuables. They're in the car. They're like, I'm not leaving them. So they, on what was a cold night. Remember there was huge temperature swings. It was like cold nights and hot days. People were just stuck there in their cars doing that.
Right. So and we had people go to the shelters, and thank you to the city of Los Angeles where our shelters were, but we had a lot of people choose to, at least on the first night, do that. And so some of the things, you do your planning and your exercise, and you still didn't think of what people might do in that kind of circumstance, and getting them, hygiene facilities and, food and other things is something that sometimes you have to deal with on the fly. I agree with the statement about over notifying, as long as the notifications are consistent, and we did have some problems with that. And so I hope that we will spend some time figuring out how to do that. We had evacuation maps, but the sheriffs put out a map, and OES put out a map, and the city put out a map, and they weren't exactly the same, and people wanted to know, are they in, are they out? And this particular fire, we've had other fires in Calabasas that are more local and smaller, where the command was in Calabasas, and we were right there, and they said, okay, what streets do we need to block off? And someone from the city could say this one, this one, and this one. And that was not possible when the command was in Camarillo with the structure that they had. And so not every order made complete sense on your streets in your town. And so there was some responsibility for the local officials to deal with some of this. We evacuated neighborhoods, and then there was no sheriff's car blocking access into the neighborhoods. We had looky-loos coming in, to the point where eventually we put our people out there to block the streets, at least temporarily, until the until the command in Camarillo sent word to block the street, even though our local sheriff's station was saying to do it, but they were not in the chain of that command. So there are some issues like that, and I think maybe, I doubt you needed anybody else at the command center, but maybe someone locally needs to be embedded there so that, for those kind of micro decisions. But the cities, you still need to sort of check on those things in that. That's something that we learned. And then, there were multiple people. You have some people who don't sign up at all, and you have other people who signed up for multiple things. So they're getting emails from the sheriff, from the fire department, from the city. Again, not always 100% consistent, so there were some issues there. We had 2,500 people try to sign up on the first night of the evacuations, which crashed our system. So we weren't able to sign up 2,500 new people in 4 hours on that night. So that kind of thing happens, and we'll look at our software and try to improve that as well. So those are some of the things that I think we can do better on. But for the most part, people evacuated. We did have very high levels of cooperation. There are some that stay behind, and they tell the story about how they saved their house because they stay behind. But I think the Kardashians said they had a private fire truck that saved their neighborhood. The private fire truck, they did have it. It stood in front of the house. They didn't do anything, but they were there.
Well, we'll have the Kardashians in a future panel discussion, just for all of us.
But we did have very high levels of cooperation, and it is, and as hard as it is not to have people be out, it is better. They've set up a really good system where the fire chief gives the orders and the sheriff enforces the orders and the city communicates the orders. So everyone's communicating with you. They all thought that I evacuated the city and that I'm in charge of letting them back in, which is fine, but you just have to be ready for that kind of interaction with the people that have concerns about it. But it was, we're certainly very grateful for the great work that was done. We did lose some homes in Calabasas and a couple of businesses and several of our city facilities, but we'll get back on track, and of course our thoughts with Malibu and all the other cities involved. Thank you.
So Chief Osby, maybe some of we can make sure this feedback as you do the deeper dive or have the consultant come in too, and I'm sure you're talking to Malibu all the time about this stuff, but any of the feedback, because there's bits and pieces from a lot of cities, I think. One is on, and we noticed this too, command structures in these kind of chaotic situations can be very far away. Are there sub-commands we can set up? Can we have people closer too? Because they'll always come to the political leaders and say, you should know everything. I just retweeted something that came from the county, and it said something about one of the canyons that wasn't burning in Malibu, and the LA Times reporter who, I saw it 5 days after the fire, was like, Mayor Garcetti, are you sure it's this? And I didn't even catch it because, if you're not following your Twitter feed for every second, you're going to miss somebody. And the confusion, I think, of trying to find command centers that are dispersed when they're bigger events is, I think, a really big, important takeaway. And we've experienced this too. When we had the fire last year, the state often comes down. The protocols are, when CAL FIRE comes, they're in charge. I remember that first press conference. They didn't know the geography. They didn't know the names of the streets. It's a good command structure when you're talking about where the money comes from and the quote-unquote experts if something gets big. But we also need those of us who are political leaders and the community folks to bubble up. The real experts are usually on a block, not coming in on a plane. So, anyways, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm from Rolling Hills. Rolling Hills is made up exclusively of single-family homes on large lots, 1 to 15 acres. And we're served by the county. I appreciate the service. It's very good service. But we have inspection.
How are the prices? Do you want to renegotiate anything?
They're outstanding.
We get a deal.
Outstanding prices.
We get inspected annually, and I think typically the county inspects to 100-foot brush clearance. In our city, it's 200 feet because we're butted up against open space and large lots and lots of, in some cases, dead vegetation. So our city has gone a little bit more proactive to brush clearance and dead vegetation clearance. We get some pushback from the city, but what we've seen is the fire department is reluctant to consider enforcing any clearance beyond the 200-foot level. I think that's 100 feet beyond what you might normally inspect for anyway. But again, we're in somewhat of a unique situation with the very large lots, lots of tall eucalyptus trees, which are great fire fuel, and in some cases, my own home bordering on open space, a conservancy area. So 200 feet would probably work in almost all locations, but in our city, not so much. And again, the local fire department representatives are reluctant to engage in anything beyond that. So I'd just be curious about your comment on that.
Well, a couple of things. And first of all, thank you for your comments. I know that, we have a lot of vocal people from the peninsula, so I'm glad that you brought that up because some of those voices come to me. A couple of things in relation to this incident, we definitely need to revisit our fire code in relation to clearance. I mean, sometimes we say 100 feet, 200 feet, even 300 feet when it permits, but then in certain areas, if there's going to be erosion issues, then we take that in consideration. But we're definitely going to have to visit that. Second, I've preached to my firefighters and my foresters, but I'm going to have to be more aggressive in the sense that I tell them that when I get complaints aren't always bad. Because, they face a lot of criticism out in the field when they're doing brush inspections, and sometimes it's very vocal. But I think that from this incident and from your comments, lessons learned that we're going to have to be more aggressive in relation to ensuring proper clearance, and in addition to that, even revisit what our current code says right now.
Oh, sorry. I guess 1, 2. We'll get you next.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We've had our share of fires too. I'm from Burbank, and we've had a lot of, the mutual aid comment is so point on. I had 2 questions. One was I wanted to ask the LA Fire Chief if you could explain the index you were describing that was at 300. I don't know what that is and whether that's in common usage among all of our departments. And then the second question is for the county chief and for the Malibu mayor. If you're going into a deep dive, how far after the incident are you going to look in terms of supplies and when the community shows up and they donate tons of materials? I was at Bob Blumenfeld's office. Donations just kept coming in, and then the question was, where do they get stored and how do they get distributed? And I was thinking about medication and other kinds of things that people who maybe getting up in the middle of the night, don't think about as they're leaving their homes. So it's really an aftermath. How much does your review of this look at how improvement could be made in the future for that aftermath? Thank you.
To your first question about the brush index, we run the weather every day of the year, and we project what it'll be tomorrow, because that tells us if we have to pre-deploy resources. And to get to that number, there's a series of about 10 factors: live fuel moisture, dead fuel moisture, wind speed, temperature. And we will get you a copy to your office of what that looks like. The thing that's important to recognize, a red flag alert is when wind speed's above 25 miles per hour and humidity is below 15%. That is one factor. And to give you an idea how we're facing a new normal now, historically, rate of spread, brush fire rate of spread, it's about 2.5 miles per hour up until very recently. Up north, when we had all those fires in Santa Rosa area, the rate of spread was about 15 miles per hour. So think about the difference. If people want to know, is it different? It definitely is different. Another thing to think about is the 20 largest fires in the history of California. We've had 17 in the last decade. So whatever your opinion is about climate change, I'll tell you that the factors, the facts lead us to believe something's different now.
Is that unique? Part of the question was, is our index unique to us? Is that something you did in-house, or is that shared county and other departments?
Because the city of Los Angeles, we have microclimates. It's so big. So the valley has a different climate from San Pedro. So we have modified it to reflect the various microclimates within the city of Los Angeles. The county's got a bigger challenge because their size is even bigger than the city.
Not geography. Is the system used by other departments, or is the system unique to LA City?
The system, I think we in general share many of the same criteria, but we've tweaked it a little bit more specific to our city.
So do you use a number system like that too?
It's pretty similar.
Okay, yeah. But maybe a slightly different formula, or
it
we
just
don't know.
depends on topography and other things, but it's similar.
So Mayor, I don't think there's a standard system, but I think you're getting a more detailed answer from Graham right now. So.
Yeah. Well, no, there is a standard system.
Oh, there is? Okay.
There is,
Okay.
yes.
Good.
Yeah.
But, for different, excuse me, Chief, for different areas, the sort of threshold where it becomes a danger, it hits the danger thing, is a different number for each of the regions. Like Malibu has a different one than Santa Clarita, and that is different than the high desert and so forth. So they're the same system, but its effect on those particular areas has a different numerical value as to when you get your game face on. And it's something that we, out in our battalion, we have a conference call every day and review the weather, and we talk about the rate of spread and how the particular conditions are going to affect fires that day. And they're super engaged on that issue.
And I guess the last part of the question was relation into donations and supplies. And I would just say in relation to donations.
Graham, hold on one second, just because he's answering the second question, real quick. If you want to hear the end of the assembly. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but,
No, sorry. I just want to make sure she could hear the answer to the second question.
yeah, we were overwhelmed in relation to donations, especially food. I mean, I could barely button my jacket right now. So, so that was overwhelming. And so, generally speaking, what we do with additional supplies is give them to shelters. I mean, we were overwhelmed in relation to the people that were evacuated. So, excess supplies go to shelters. I mean, each of our respective fire departments in relation to cash donations, I'm sure other nonprofits have mechanisms to give to those foundations in relation to training and education and response. And then the last thing I just want to just articulate as it relates to supplies, that's a personal responsibility that we really want to impress upon our citizens. I kind of brushed upon that before, but you need to be prepared for any type of emergency incident prior to the incident. If you're trying to think about evacuation, or I have medical supplies, or where are my valuables I want to take with me during the incident, that's not the time to do it. So if you have some medical condition or whatever conditions are impact your family, your household, you need to think about those in advance. Same thing with evacuation routes. You need to think about those in advance. For example, this fire came from Calabasas. I know that, we would probably think of multiple ways to get out of Malibu, but it finally got to where there was only one way out. So these are things that when, as citizens, that was articulated by our mayor here, that we have to have personal responsibility in relation to our own welfare in advance of an incident.
And then Mr. Fasana following.
Our city of Rancho Palos Verdes is on the peninsula with these other cities, and Mayor Wilson described many of the things. We have a lot of open space. Actually, our city has 1,400 acres of open space. Last year, when I was at my home, I saw a spark come up through the Southern California Edison line. It hit a transformer on my neighbor's and dropped sparks and started a fire. And my neighbor was there to take a hose and put the fire out quickly. But had he not been there or I not been there, there would have been a major fire. It would have affected our city, Rolling Hills. And so that obviously was one of the things while I was campaigning for office that frightened me a lot. So I appreciate the fact that our citizens should probably continue to up our building standards. But what is and maybe it's a political question too, what does the county or the city's fire think about holding our utility companies more responsible for their facilities?
Let me jump in on that one. Sorry, Chief.
He's the mayor right now.
When I met
Who's in charge here? It just depends on the given day, right?
When the president came by, I asked my city manager, I said, okay, I might have the big man's ear for 1 second. What's the key thing? And she said, and I agreed with her, undergrounding of utilities. And he recognized it, and he said, but it's very expensive. But we've had a lot of discussions about this whole, Edison turning off the power and people not liking it in advance of a fire, et cetera, and liability issues. We've seized on that opportunity to say, hey, this is the time to have that open discussion about hardening our electrical system to be able to have a durable, robust system that can withstand normal environmental conditions. Santa Ana winds are a regular occurrence here. It shouldn't be something that makes power lines go down, et cetera. If they want to have it up above the ground, it's got to be strong enough, and we need to demand that. But we also need to start thinking really about, let's get some of these wires under the ground, and let's start doing it now. And if they're worried about liability, well, it's maybe time to start breaking out the checkbook and start putting these things underground, because that helps to make it a durable and robust system, which is the key words I keep emphasizing to all those guys. Sorry, Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And undergrounding is a solution. If you notice, in lower communities, the wires are underground. But however, for the local fire district, in particular Southern California Edison, a lot of the major county fire chiefs, because I know LA City has their own utility, but all the major county fire chiefs sent a letter to the California Public Utilities Commission to support Southern California in hardening their lines. It's going to take at least a decade for them to do that, but you know, some of their power grid is several decades old. But they have a proposal that in a lot of these interface areas that they can harden their utilities by certain enhancements to keep wires from breaking and arcing and starting brush fires. So as the fire chief of our district, and I got all the other utility fire chiefs to support that letter, and so we can all follow with our California Public Utility Commission to ensure that they approve Southern California Edison's proposal, because they are trying to harden their utility grid, but they're also dealing with the bureaucracy of the state. So I would, if you need more information, you can contact me or contact the CPUC to have them expedite that process.
John?
Yes, a few things come to mind. We had a fire a few years ago in the city of Duarte, and I think some of our bigger challenges really occurred afterward. We had flood issues, and I think when we talk about the evacuation for the fire, it's kind of a one-time thing. We've had to evacuate parts of the community 3 or 4 times for floods. A few things come to mind. Number one, the evacuation fatigue has really set into where compliance really has dropped. And it's just difficult to really determine what the intensity of the rainfall will be. So people see and they feel there are a lot of false alarms there. So that's something else to keep in mind. Another being that when you set up these evacuations, you can kind of plan for those in terms of the weather. But people need to understand that if they're outside the zone when that evacuation takes effect, they're not going to get back in. So it gets back to having your medications with you and having some supplies with you if you live in a high-risk area and you're going to be having storms and things of that type. The other, if you have gaps in your checkpoints, next door will identify what those are to all the other residents, and they will use those and get back into the communities.
Any other questions? Any other wrap-up thoughts from the panelists?
I'd like to provide some information that you could provide to your constituents. It's absolutely free. If you go to the Pulse Point, get the Pulse Point app. And what that does, you can set it up so anytime the fire department responds to a brush fire, it's called vegetation fire on that app, you get an alert on your phone. So whenever I talk to homeowners groups within the city of Los Angeles in a brush area, I show it to them and I help them download it. And that way, that's the best alerting system, the fastest alerting system that we're going to come to an area near you if you set it up right, and you can decide and start monitoring the media if you need to take action. It's called Pulse Point. It's free. I highly encourage you to share that.
Does anybody have Pulse Point on their phone? Yeah. It's great. It was started to help people who like are having cardiac arrest, and before paramedics can get there, it might be somebody in your building or a block away. And I was just in Washington, D.C. and got a notification of a cardiac arrest down the street. And then it was added with departments. So if you have your own fire department, make sure they're also signed up so that the 911 system alerts, because our firefighters often use that before they even get the official notification, because it's a split second faster. It's a pretty amazing thing. Yeah, another thing there.
Has anyone ever done a survey about how many wood shake roofs are still in existence within individual cities or counties? It's a concern now in Hidden Hills especially. Besides undergrounding, that's probably our 2 biggest safety concerns, that over 5% of our homes still have wood shake roofs, and they're generally owned by older residents that are on fixed incomes. So.
I don't think we have in the city. Is anybody else in other cities done that inventory? You have?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do have pre-existing, and we do have in our fire code, if you replace more than 10% of your roof, you need to upgrade it up to the current code. But unfortunately, as it relates to the fire codes for residential, the new code is not retroactive back to existing residential homes.
But it's a great point. In the same way that we're looking at soft story buildings for earthquakes, it may be something that legislatively we want to do at our local government. So, and then what we had to do is try to figure out what's the mechanism to fund that, because there are lower income folks.
We did just start talking about the possibility of creating a foundation and
would do that.
give grants to these folks that have, money issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Anything else?
I'll just conclude that, first of all, thank you for the invitation to the forum. And to the mayor of Calabasas, just relating back to some of his comments, that every time we do an after-action review on these incidents, the number one thing that comes up is communications. And I think that this forum and this dialogue has emphasized the point that we need to get together to discuss these things in advance of an incident. I think that, sometimes we work in a silo as it relates to our fire code, but definitely the fire service can do more in relation as it relates to codes and enforcement, and partner better with our communities as it relates to public safety, number one. And then number two, I joked about the president's comments initially, but when you really listen to some of the things he said, some of them make sense in relation to vegetative management. And I think that we live in an environment right now where it's very hard to do controlled burns or do anything in relation to environmental issues and AQMD. And I think after this devastating incident that we need to revisit that. And as a fire service, we need to be more aggressive in relation to creating larger defensible spaces around the communities that live in these types of environments.
Let me echo what the chief just said about communication. Effective communication is the key to teamwork, and during a big emergency like this, that's not the time for those of us who've gotten used to super connectivity to all of a sudden whoosh, go dark. And we have to look at our technology for our local area to make sure it's more robust and that it will withstand something like this, at least in enough to cover the area so people can get the message out. But also we as a city need to be more effective in how we communicated with our residents in the days after the fire. And I think there were some major shortcomings in that, and we have to address those things also. So your team only works as well as you can communicate, and communication is the key. And I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to communicate our ideas today. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the communities obviously affected, continue to call on the collective brother and sisterhood of mayors and cities around. If you have feedback for the county as they do their after action stuff, let us know. We'll maybe push something out as a point of contact in your department so folks can give their thoughts. And let's give this panel a round of applause and thank them for a great discussion. Thank you.
So thanks again for the opportunity to speak, and I'm going to keep my thoughts really brief because we have 5 esteemed panel members up here, and I want to introduce each of them. And first of all, I don't know if Chief Osby is still here, but I'm glad to know that the chief endorses forest raking. That's what I took away from that, is that actually there is something to forest raking after all. But before we get started in all seriousness with the panel, I want to do something I did about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was with Al Kiahi on the Economic Development Advisory Council, entrepreneur myself. Mike and I met through Entrepreneurs Organization. Several people that the Mayor Garcetti knows are also part of that organization. And I was concerned about what people thought about the city of El Segundo. So I brought him into my office. We did a little whiteboard session. Mayor Bill Fisher was at the helm at the time, and I said, there were 15 entrepreneurs. I don't think, Mike, you were at that meeting, but there were about 15 entrepreneurs in the room from all over LA, outside El Segundo. And I did a word association. So I'm going to bear with me here. I just want to take a few minutes because I want to get your honest, candid opinion about your perception of El Segundo. And Barbara, where are you at? Maybe Barbara or Megan could actually, I'd like to capture these thoughts. I know we're videotaping, but this is, and now we have Richard Lundquist in the back of the room, who happens to be indirectly the landlord, actually is the landlord here, and our largest commercial real estate owner in El Segundo. Richard, thank you for being here. He and his wife, Melanie, significant philanthropists in the LA County. But I want to just ask what you think. One word association. So just bear with me here. So word that comes to mind, good, bad, and ugly. Jobs. Jobs, thank you. I like that one. Beer. Beer, El Segundo Brewing Company. El Segundo native IPA, award-winning IPAs, good call. You've had it, I trust? Eric, you've had the beer? It's good stuff, yes. It's not too early for an IPA. Yes, sir.
Undergrounded utilities, I noticed.
Undergrounded utilities, over here, right, I suppose, right? Is that the only place we have those, Greg? I know our neighbors, Manhattan Beach, took a lot of their residential, their utilities. Where's Steve? Is he still? You guys did that, right? Underground utilities in residential neighborhoods in Manhattan Beach?
They do it themselves by creating districts. So we facilitate, but they actually do it and pay for it themselves.
Okay, thank you. What else? Yes, sir. Tech partner for Culver City. Love that. Okay, anything else? I haven't heard anything negative yet. Come on, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Or any of our city council members, right, Scott? What else? It smells. Okay, we're working on that. You can thank DWP for that one. Just kidding, Mayor. Public Works, that's right. What else? Anything else? Revitalization. Thank you. I appreciate that, Betty. Bill, come on, you're a neighbor. What do you got? Traffic. Like there's not much here or what? We need to move it along. Okay, like PCH especially. By the way, we just rebranded Sepulveda. It's PCH. That was within the last year or so. We did that after reaching out to our business community and asking their opinion. It's been Sepulveda historically. Manhattan Beach, I think you guys just voted to keep it Sepulveda, right? It's okay, sorry, I didn't mean to go there. Anything else? All right, anyway, thank you for that. I didn't get as much participation as I would like, but that's okay, I won't hold it against you guys. So I want to talk about the members of our panel. You recognize some of them for sure. I'll start to my immediate left. Mike Mothner and I met about 10, 11 years ago. Mike started a business in his dorm room at Dartmouth. He grew up in Manhattan Beach, and he has moved multiple times within the city of El Segundo, has grown organically his company, grown by acquisitions, well over 300 employees now, Mike?
Like 400 now.
400, can't even keep up. And he's in the digital marketing space, doing some incredible things, best place to work, winning all kinds of awards. He's also a member of the Economic Development Advisory Council that Al chairs and that Richard has been on for since the inception. Right, Mr. Lundquist? Yes. So let's give it up for Mike Mothner. Thanks for being here, Mike. Next to Mike, we have Vandad Eswabadi. He spoke earlier. Van and I were at one of the events he did last night, so we just flew in late last night from San Jose. He was hosting an event at Google X Labs. I think they just go by X Labs now, but essentially Starburst Accelerator, which is based here, came from Paris. Francois moved his company here. They put aerospace companies together, so almost like a matchmaker for large Boeings, Raytheons, Northrops of the world in the small burgeoning industry like drones and flying vehicles, satellites, you name it. So we went to an event last night to pitch the city of El Segundo. And Van, we love having you here because he's helping reinvent aerospace as we know it today. So thanks for being here, Van. By the way, Van is no stranger to government because he worked for, well, you were an intern for Nancy Pelosi and
I staff for Adam Schiff, yeah.
Yeah, so he's spent plenty of time on the Hill. Thank you. Plenty is probably the right word, right? More than enough.
I sold my soul for the defense industry.
There you go. Thank you. All right, next to Van is Anton van Ruden. Anton spent most of his career, I think, in Germany, right, with eBay, running large divisions for eBay. He's COO of Textile. And anyone familiar with Shoe Dazzle? Right? Weren't the Kardashians involved at one point? Yes. Was that kind of the beginning of textiles, I understand it, more or less? Well, you can talk a little bit about that when we go to questions. But $2 billion company, roughly, is that right? Well, who knows? Anyway, it's a big company. And Anton is charged with reimagining retail, and they're doing it. So if you go into, he'll probably talk about this, but if you go into what's the brand that's the ladies? No, Fabletics. So yoga pants, right, Anton? So if you go into a Fabletics store, which is more like a showroom, you try on some yoga pants, you scan all your information, and it will remember everything about you. Kind of scary, actually. Not really. But they're really the first that's doing omni-channel retail. We've been talking about it for 10, 15 years. So Anton's going to talk about the future of retail and what we can expect as cities because it's changing, and that will inevitably affect our sales tax, right? Next to Anton he needs no introduction. I'm sure he'll stick around for some autographs. Luke Robitaille, president of the LA Kings. Look at that. I don't even get to finish, Luke. I didn't even get to finish. You got an applause. 19 seasons in the NHL, won a Stanley Cup in 2002, and the Kings have been incredibly generous. They won our first ever Champions of Business Award, and we're so grateful to have them in our community and as business partners with us. So, Luke, thank you for being here. Next to Luke is Tim Harris. Tim Harris was a goalkeeper at UCLA. Played professional soccer, 4 seasons, was on the national team, and is the COO and president of the Lakers. He also has been recruited recently to the Economic Development Advisory Council. If you need an MC for any event, this guy's amazing, hilarious, no joke. You definitely need him. He's great. Just cost you a couple cocktails. So thank you, Tim, for being here. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, so we talked about El Segundo earlier, so let me find my questions here. Tim, I'll start with you.
Okay.
So the Lakers and the G League, which is the rebranded development league, right? The South Bay Lakers have been in El Segundo for a long time. You recently built an $80 million facility. And what were your thoughts behind the decision to make the investment in El Segundo? And how does this type of world-class facility benefit the organization from a business perspective? Maybe talk about UCLA Health as well and relationship there.
So when you have to understand kind of the historical narrative part of this is we had been in the facility with the Kings since 2000. And what has taken place since 2000 is, and Luke can attest, is there's an arms race when it comes to training centers, because training centers in the NBA and the NHL and the NFL and Major League Baseball, it's all about recruitment. It's all about recruiting free agents. When it comes to the high-end free agents, the economic conversation goes something like this. We can offer you a max contract, okay. And then you move on to everything else. And everything else is, what can you do for me to help improve and extend my career? And so that we had made the decision that in order to compete with the rest of the league, we needed a state-of-the-art training center. Where we had been before had served us well. We won 3 championships there, we had 5 championships there. But if you knew the training center, there wasn't the word Lakers anywhere on it. And if you knew Phil Jackson, that's a perfect site for him, is a bunker mentality. Your name is nowhere. Go to work, get your work done, and leave. And yet the newer player, the younger player, the millennial type player, they want a platform. And they kept telling us, we want a bigger platform. We want a bigger stage. And so when you combine our need to compete with a state-of-the-art training center, plus the players' desire to have a bigger platform, we decided that we were going to dive into the market and create our own training center. Why did we choose El Segundo? At first we made a real estate decision, location, location, location. A lot of our players live in the South Bay. The younger players tend to start out in the marina. It's freeway close. A lot of times the coaches like to practice before a road trip, and so we wanted to be able to practice and have a quick trip to the airport to get away. But more than location, 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 we needed to get it up and running quickly. And so we were looking for a space that was not encumbered by a bunch of entitlements, because we didn't need it to take a bunch of years because we had to get done. And the other thing, and this was our experience having been in El Segundo, we knew the city was very easy to work with when it came to business. And so we knew that we wouldn't get bogged down in the process of trying to get approvals because we had a hard deadline. So the decision to stay in El Segundo was very easy. The decision as to why we built the training center, it had, obviously, there was commercial reasons behind it. And then we had to find a naming rights partner, because everybody has a naming rights partner for anything you do in sports. And that's when we built our partnership with UCLA Health. And UCLA Health, they wanted to marry themselves with a big brand to improve their presence worldwide. But UCLA Health, and you see it as you drive down PCH, you see UCLA Health is making an investment in the South Bay. And one of the things I know I've spoken to a few of you about this is we continue, because I live in the South Bay, I've got kids, we continue to push UCLA Health to look at building a hospital in the South Bay, because if you live El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, it's just a long way to go to Little Company Mary or Torrance Memorial. So this is about the growth of El Segundo, but this has all been brought about by this partnership that the Lakers have with UCLA and with the city of El Segundo.
Great, thanks, Tim. And then before we move on, just real quick, maybe one thought about the EDAC committee that you're on, like why you decided, you're a busy guy, why you decided to do that, join the committee, and what it's maybe a takeaway from your involvement there.
I'm going to answer by using an example, and the NBA has a similar committee. It's called TAC, and it's Team Advisory Committee. And what it is it's a rotating group of 8 team presidents who meet regularly with the NBA. And the purpose of it is the NBA wants to hear from the teams things that the NBA is working on so that they can learn about it through the lens of a team, through the lens of a team president, what the league is doing and how that will impact a team, a market, or a team president. And EDAC is very similar, is only you're replacing the NBA with the city, and you're replacing the team presidents with the members of EDAC. And so what it allows the city to view the things they're doing through the lens of the business community. And so to me, it's a complete win.
Thanks, Tim. Love it. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to Luke. I got kind of a harder question later that we'll get to, but we'll start with one that you were, as I mentioned, you were the first Champion of Business Award winner, the Kings. And how has the city and the business environment in El Segundo supported the Kings' growth and success? So we have some unique attributes of El Segundo that many cities don't have. Proximity to LAX, of course, the beach, et cetera. But maybe talk about some of the things that the city has done that other cities could learn in terms of partnering with business.
Well, first, I thought you said you joined the board so you get your permits quicker.
They can't get any quicker in this town.
No, for us as an organization to be here, I mean, we've been working with the city for many years. I mean, you just look like what Tim was talking about, like when they came up with the vision of having their own facility. For us, for numerous years, we were in 5 or 6 different offices as an organization. So right away, when we had the opportunity to move everyone into our own facility and move our entire business staff with our hockey operations staff, and then having the opportunity to build a performance center, I mean, just to be able to bring everyone together, and then taking this and then been working with the city over time, and you know, our facility is open to the public. So for us, we get like, I think it's 1.2 million people that come in through our doors a year. Even the performance center that we're going to build, in the morning it'll be for our players only, and then in the afternoon it'll be open to the public. So our businesses are a little bit different, hockey versus other sports sometimes. So due to that fact, we're constantly looking into growing the business and to working with different companies there in the neighborhood. And you know, we've been very fortunate. We've had great partners. The city has been great with us. Like Tim was saying, probably our greatest scouting tool is our facility. You constantly bring in players, and I don't even think we take them to Staples Center most of the time anymore. We just take them here. We show them what we're going to do for them, and like he said, we're in a cap league, and actually our league is a hard cap league, so you can't go above anything. So you just tell, Tim's right. We just tell them there's your contract, but here's what we're going to do. Here's where you're going to live. You know, and the proximity to the airport is always great, but I would think it's gotten a lot bigger than that. I mean, now we're a destination. Like any parents that their kids are either figure skaters that want to have the dream of joining the Olympic team or playing hockey or skating, they're coming to El Segundo. So it's changed tremendously for us the last 18 years.
That's great, thanks. And as a dad with 5 kids and 2 older ones that played in El Segundo inline hockey, when we used to have these like foam pads that we would drag out to Richmond Field, Greg knows what I'm talking about, to now seeing hockey is so vibrant in El Segundo. It's great to see. We've always had a love and affinity for the Kings, but to like see all the kids coming up now in roller and ice is amazing. You guys have been a big part of that, a big part of the community. Thank you, Luke. Okay, we're going to go to Anton. So I alluded to this earlier, but textile, your business model is really on the forefront of how retail and e-commerce are changing. And you've recently opened several brick and mortar stores or showrooms, I forget what you refer to them as. And we've all heard about this, but what do you see as the future of retail? As leaders in our cities, how should we start thinking about how retail will change in our backyards?
Well, first of all, it is changing. It is changing tremendously, and we just come out of Black Friday last week, And so you plan for this Black Friday all year, you know it's there, and it's the biggest online shopping day of the year. And you have all your tech teams ready, and you make all the investments, and still the site goes down. And right. And then, but then it's not funny when it happens. It really is stressful. But then you look, and then Walmart was down, Lululemon was down, J.Crew was down almost the entire day. Amazon had some problems. So to me, that nicely illustrates, even if you take Amazon or Walmart, you have infinite amount of capital to invest in technology, and you know Black Friday is Black Friday. I think that there's so much more traffic still coming from regular retail into online that it's just, I tell my tech team, you did great. It was just 60 minutes across 3 different outages on the day. It's really hard to be perfect on a day like that because there's so much still going on. So that's for one. The other one, and that brings us to our brick and mortar strategy, we are very, very convinced that traditional retail is not going away. It will always be there. It will just change for what it is and what people use it for. And whenever I lived here now for about 3 years, in those 3 years, the Point opened, Manhattan Village is getting this whole big remodel, and even in Torrance, what's it called? The mall also got
Crossroad? No,
the fashion, the Del Amo Fashion Center. Yeah, exactly. Also got entirely remodeled. So you can see. I mean, malls are not going anywhere. It's just changing what's happening in there. And we have a Fabletics store in that Torrance Mall. We have 24 stores now across the entire country. And the way we think of retail is as an extension of our online business. So that's how it's entirely different to everyone else that has all these stores, and now they're trying to build an online business. So the way what we do with our stores is we gather data there. We gather a lot of data there. So we check you into the fitting room. We check in what you take into the fitting room. And now on a real-time basis, we know the conversion rate of a yoga pant that we just launched maybe that week. And then we can make changes to it if there's something wrong with it. Or we can optimize how we sell it online because we see how it's working in our retail door. So we collect data. We sign up members in our store, so we're a membership-based business. So we have people come in that want to be members. We sign them up, and we have a lot of members coming in there into our stores as well that want to touch the brand and want to feel what it looks like, not just shop online. And we open the stores based on where our member base is in the country. So we look where do we have hundreds, a certain number threshold, I don't know, 300,000 members in a certain area, 20 minutes away from a store. That's where we place the store. So that it's a destination for our members. And then we gather more members in those stores as well. And they're comping up 20, 30% year over year. You hear how everyone's closing stores. With this strategy, it's working perfectly. So they're growing tremendously, and we have like, I think 10, 15 or so that we will open next year, and that's a big part of our strategy.
It's amazing. The thing that struck me too is I was with Starbucks for about 6 years, and basically other retailers would just say, "Hey, where are the Starbucks located?" Right? There was a traffic generator. Now it's like we can look and see where all our traffic is and where users live. It's great. Thank you, Anton, for sharing.
For us, that's Lulu. So.
Oh really? Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Fabletics is the better Lululemon. It's 1/3 of the price, same quality of the product, and so we take their market share. So we go close to Lulu and then just have the better offering.
And if you sign up today, is there a promo code?
I have promo codes here, right?
Okay.
So come see me after.
See him afterwards. All right. Thanks, Van. You work with aerospace startups all over the world. And you were brought on just after you and Francois decided to come to LA from Paris. And what can cities do to support entrepreneurs in general, and specifically in aerospace? And before you start, I just want to say, like, even last night we were at that event. It was a great event. One of your panelists, Uma, came up to me at break and said, "Hey, I've got this great startup that's looking at LA, and what can you guys do for us?" And El Segundo, we don't have, there's a sales tax credit, but a lot of these companies don't have a product sales tax issue to contend with. So besides dollars, even though I'd like to hear about that as well, but what else can cities do to embrace new startups and aerospace companies in general?
So I appreciate it might be odd to see an aerospace guy sitting on a panel with tech and e-commerce and sports, But essentially, we're doing the same thing. We're scouting, we're finding talent, and we're really identifying with the economic engine of what is Southern California. And for us, when Francois and I'm a Southern California native. I'm from, I lived in Hollywood and Beverly Hills and then mostly grew up in Orange County, but I ran away from here 15 years ago, never thinking I'd come back. And I'm having a very incredible born-again experience of how much I love being here. And South Bay in particular has been incredibly inviting and helping us to demonstrate just that tide of change of how talent that comes out of these engineering schools wants to look at product development in new ways, the same way we've seen it in e-commerce and digital media. We're now seeing it in rocket launch startups and companies that are now coming out of SpaceX, coming out of Northrop and wanting to develop their own new businesses. And and here in El Segundo in particular, when Francois and I, we kind of landed in LA, all of our clients told us we needed to be here. We did a crazy 20-city roadshow from Wichita, Kansas to Seattle, Daytona, Dayton, and gosh, yeah, I think we covered so many different cities, and everyone said you need to be in Southern California. It's kind of like industry neutral. It's like Switzerland for aerospace. Every segment of industry has something going on here. And to be fair, we came here and it was an incredible coincidence that through LA EDC and everything, we ping-ponged and we got text message to you through EO and Ben, and showing up at that EDAC meeting where Richard was kind enough to take us under his wing and help us build this facility where you are all sitting was an incredible journey and story, and something we're really grateful for. But it's a testament of what all the other startups are experiencing, and we're continuing to kind of expand on that network and demonstrate those opportunities for all these other companies and investors and industries that want to look at product development in new ways, and El Segundo's been nothing short of that.
So Van, on that point, last night someone even asked, again, because dollars are limited, we're all fiduciaries here, what could we do? What are startups most in need of when they're just getting going? You know, they're doing their seed rounds, they're doing whatever round they're in, but what can we do as cities to help facilitate their progress, especially early on?
Real estate's been the no-brainer. I mean, in France, the city subsidized that real estate for us. And we started small, and now we've expanded out of our old facility, and we are officially the new innovation lab for the Ministry of Defense. And we've moved into a new building, and we now become the facility manager for not just the space agency, the defense agency, but all the new startups that continue to come out of those labs. Singapore, it's the same thing. Here in California, real estate's a very difficult industry to work with, and I think thanks to some of the leaders and philanthropists, we have benefited from that, but we really want to make sure that we're able to create a home. Well, what we've seen with the Clean Tech Incubator is a good model of what we want to scale up. We want to continue to educate, support STEM, create a hardware incubation space, and make it that much easier to defy the economics of what it means to build these products. Aerospace is traditionally seen as a black box, and we don't think that's the case anymore. And as we continue to embrace open innovation, the city's been really good at that sort of phase one, but we're really ready to take it to the next level and continue to make Southern California that home for innovation in mobility and communications and all the infrastructure that will support that.
Thanks, Van. And being at that, essentially last night it's like a pitch contest, more or less.
It's
right?
a Shark Tank for aerospace.
Shark Tank, so you've got Boeing's, Northrop's, Raytheon's Aerospace in the room, the big boys, along with like the smaller companies like, what was one that was there? There was a flying car company, another VTOL company, vertical takeoff and landing.
Well, one of the things I really appreciated in the last panel was the discussion around the fires and the lessons learned. Is there was a lot of conversations about the technology behind that, the notification systems, talking about the utility infrastructure and putting them underground. I think we have to step back and think that much more creatively about how we're problem solving these opportunities. And there are companies that are using autonomy, aerial robotics to inspect these power lines and be that much more forward thinking in how we address these opportunities. And you are, I hate to say it, but it's up to yourselves to help enable these opportunities for the talent that's here. Southern California is this incredible cultural collision of these innovators and the investors that want to demonstrate these problem-solving opportunities, and they definitely presented that last night.
Thanks, Van. Mike Mothner, CEO of W Promote, founded that company, as I mentioned, in your dorm room at Dartmouth. Talk about, you moved multiple times here in El Segundo. Talk about your journey. I know you live in Manhattan Beach. Why you work here? What's been unique? You're also a member of the Economic Development Advisory Council. Maybe just talk about your experience here in town.
Yeah, it's interesting, so the positive part of having to outgrow or needing to move offices, 7 times in 10 years, is that you get to keep reevaluating where you want to be, right? You get to come start fresh, figure out internally what you got right, what you do differently, and we get to look at where in LA we'd want to be. And so we've gone through this exercise like 5 or 6 times where we say, okay, we're running out of space. Is there a better place to be, right? And we've looked at, Playa Vista and Santa Monica, and we've looked at Torrance, and we looked at downtown, and we really kind of zoom out and look at where we could go, and we keep coming back here. And it's interesting, part of the reason is it's really, really great proximity. I mean, this is a common theme, right? We have a lot of travel in and out of LAX. We have 7 offices around the country. We're next door to it. That's a big deal. Your last leg of the journey is 10 minutes versus an hour is a material difference. Also, interestingly, if you go around the country, you ask what's the worst thing about LA, you're probably going to hear traffic, even whether it's lore or reality. Interestingly, the way our 200 and something employees at our El Segundo office get around that is once they get a job here and realize they feel like it's a good fit, they move close, right? And so we end up with this kind of halo around it. Interestingly, there's not enough housing in El Segundo, so they end up around El Segundo, which is something I'm working on very slowly in EDAC. I think the other things that people really care about, restaurants. I mean, I have a largely millennial workforce. They like cool restaurants and bars and things to do that are atypical. The public transportation's helpful. It doesn't quite get where we need to go, but people are generally pretty close. And honestly, and this is a common theme among the other panelists, we keep building out offices. It's a great place to get stuff done, things like permits and things like signage and kind of like the nuts and bolts that I think can grind to a halt in other places. They kind of just, they happen, which is great. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the big pieces. I will say one of the only negative things with El Segundo is it's stuck inside of California, which is a much more challenging place to do business versus other states, but I don't think we can solve that one at the time, so.
All right, on that note, I'm just kidding. I experience the same pain as an employer myself, so thank you, Mike. And Mike, what are you seeing? You work with hundreds of companies. What are you seeing as some cutting edge technologies or innovations that cities should be on the lookout for?
It's interesting. So we do digital marketing. We use search and social media and so forth to basically help businesses acquire customers, whether that's retail or direct-to-consumer brands, hospitality, people booking hotel rooms, plane flights. I mean, kind of anything that's transactional. We work with clients that do that. And one of the things we're doing with El Segundo is looking at how do we take these things that we do to help businesses acquire customers and say, well, what are the customers of a city? The customers of a city are businesses that come in and rent space. They are offices and restaurants and hotels and so forth. They are tourists that come in and pick a place in this example, LA, to be the jumping off point to LA vacations. And they're business travelers that potentially have meetings or visits throughout the city and kind of have to pick some place. And El Segundo is not necessarily the obvious choice, although there's lots of options kind of depending on where you're going. So we're deploying a lot of the same things that we actually do, or I'm sort of helping, one of many people helping to lead the city to say, hey, let's market the city the same way we would market a business that's looking for customers. And so let's raise the awareness from a tourist standpoint, from a business travel standpoint, and from businesses that are looking, kind of going through that analysis of, never really heard of El Segundo. Your word association, everyone is very too kind. There's lots of other word associations that wouldn't have been as pleasant, but there's so many positive things. And I think that the marketing has been, cities don't market themselves very well. And I think we're at least trying to start that process. So yeah, I think it's a really, I don't know if it's entirely innovative, but we think it can be impactful to where the city wants to go.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, getting back to Luke and Tim, question for you. I just heard something crazy. A buddy of mine started this company called the NCSA. They help athletes get placed in scholarships, and their parents are based out of Chicago. And Manhattan Beach guy, Chris Kraus, great exit. But he told me, I was touring his facility. What do you think the #1 scholarship category is? Anyone have a guess? Sport. #1 sport for scholarships in college. E-sports. E-sports.
Wow.
So I bring this up to say I was astonished by that. I was like, all right, Merrick, go back to your Fortnite right now. I want you doing Fortnite reps. Just kidding. He plays basketball and lacrosse too. But what do you see in terms of how is the NBA, the NHL, like what are your organizations doing to embrace esports? In fact, one of our colleagues, Mark Merrill, who you know, who founded Riot Games, League of Legends, he was in our same EO group. They sold out Staples Center for their World Championship, and those are people watching people playing video games on a big screen. That's where I feel old and irrelevant, right there.
Right.
But what are you two thinking about? What are your organizations thinking about in terms of how to embrace that? You know, Patrick Soon-Shiong has been investing heavily. Rick Fox, former Laker, has got a couple teams, I think, in esports. So just love to hear your thoughts on that.
We know it's coming. It's here, and it's very relevant. Like the NHL's dipping their toe into it. I don't think we're nowhere near where the NBA or the NFL has gotten into it. AEG, our parent company, has bought a team, so it's something we're constantly studying. That being said, you got to be an expert to be good at it. So, like, if we're a hockey team and we're focused on winning the next game and so forth, I think it's wrong for us to think, oh, we're going to get there and be really good the same. We're going to manage like a hockey team. And so we're aware of that. For us, right now, we're very intrigued by the virtual merch. We think to have our name on different teams and so forth, working with them would be good. We know there's one thing about that, like, what's really hot today could be another sport tomorrow. It's a little bit different too, so you really got to know what you're doing following. So, like I said, AEG is really involved into it, so we're always there. We're helping them. I mean, these players that play, they're athletes. They got masseuse. They got it's amazing. They got the nutrition program and so forth. It just blows my mind. It's truly incredible, but. It's there, and it's amazing how many the ratings they're getting and so forth. We're very well aware, but like I said, I think for us as an organization, we're really looking to be involved, but from a standpoint like whether we could put our brand with them and work with them, because I'm not sure to what level, like the EA game, the hockey game, if it's ever really going to take off with the kids. It's got to take off with the expert. There is a league, and it's going on, and I think we have 9 teams in the NHL now. We want to get to 30, and it's a good branding thing so far, but you got to make sure you get the right people running it, because, it's not like an ex-hockey player or a GM that was running a hockey team, I don't believe could go run that league, because it's an entire other world, and we got to be aware of that.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate that. Tim?
Yeah, we're this season we're going to have an E team, and it's been an education. And for us, what we've been wrestling with is how do we connect the fan who's watching our E team play to someone who will buy a ticket to a Lakers game at Staples Center. I mean, because for us right now, the Lakers playing at Staples Center, that's the engine room of what runs this organization. So we will be, and we've committed. We're gonna have a team this year, and it's been a complete education as to what goes into it and what these players need, how famous these players are, and we understand. To Luke's point, we're not sure how big NBA 2K will get. We understand the popularity of shoot 'em up, like we get that, how that's popular, but we're not yet able to connect the dots. But in that. In the 2K world, these athletes are celebrities. They are celebrities, and again, we're just getting involved, and we're learning on the go as to how this is going to work. And my favorite thing was when the league called me and they said, because we're staffing up and we're getting our players through the dispersal draft, and the guy who's doing it is coming to me and he's saying, we got through the dispersal draft, we got sort of a Malone and Stockton, and I like, Malone and Stockton, these two guys, they're just sitting, and I can't get my head around it. But my favorite phone call was when the league called me and they said, Tim, you're behind on your staffing. I said, what are we behind on? They said, you don't have an equipment manager. And I'm like, what does he need, a polo shirt and a headband? I didn't understand. But it is, you have to approach it as if it's not an offshoot. And so we're all in. We're working with Patrick to possibly utilize the space across the street from the firehouse, because you have to have a 24/7, just like your big team, you have to have a 24/7 training center for your E-team. And
Right.
it's a beast, a completely different beast.
In each position, they play position.
Yes, you have a coach. You have, they have to play together, and these are, we're going to house them at the Residence Inn, and these are 19-year-olds. Right? It's daunting what's coming our way. El Segundo PD, it's daunting what's coming your way.
Chaperones included. Yeah, crazy. All right, thanks. Anton, maybe a little bit more about just retail. You touched on the omni-channel, and what else, like any other cool companies in LA that are doing something similar that are in your peer group? What else do you see happening in retail? Just you guys? Awesome.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe a little more about us. Well, no.
That's fine too.
So we only talked about Fabletics really. So the Textile Fashion Group is the parent company, and we have in the last 7 years built three $200 million brands. They're all global brands: Just Fab, Shoe Dazzle, and Fabletics. And we just launched a new one this year with Rihanna, her lingerie line, Savage X Fenty. That's the next $200 million brand, hopefully next year already.
So I wasn't too far off on them at 800, 2 billion,
right,
close.
You know, I just wasn't answering because whatever people value it at, we would be.
That's right.
I want to undersell, right? So it could be more than 2 billion. We have 5 million reoccurring customers every month across the world, and there's so many fashion categories that we don't really cover yet, and one of them is men. They're all women right now, and so next year we're going to launch our men's athleisure line. We have all the great designers from Lululemon that did the Lululemon men's line, so they're now here because they love living in El Segundo and working here. So there you go. And so men's will be on our radar going forward. Our philosophy for the company overall is that we built a platform and technology to build fashion brands online. We think that the future of fashion brands is not built in retail, they're built online, and then you can use retail as omnipresence. But there's many more that we can build on this platform, and the one challenge that we have with all the other great companies that are around here and that are around in the world is that we need a lot of engineers and a lot of tech people for the platform. So it's fashion and tech, and they could work anywhere. So that's really, really tough. It's a tough battle to get them not to work at Snap or Facebook or Google or Amazon or wherever else they could go. And one way we do it is with this amazing location and the great office that we have here. So far it's working quite well.
So that sounds like a theme. I know Snap was buying up a whole bunch of property in Venice, and it sounds like you're all following the same kind of blueprint, which is you got to have the best of class facility.
Yes.
You know, location is kind of a given, but then that in addition. Okay, right. Thank you. Van, really quickly, I want to turn over for a couple questions too, but just talk about LA Air Force Base. What are you hearing? I'm sure plenty of people in this room have heard some things, obviously vital to our regional economy. Can you talk about the relationship with Aerospace Corp and just your dealings with them and what you're hearing on the street, so to speak?
Okay, so traditionally, LA Air Force Base is the only Air Force base in the country that doesn't have a runway. It's the largest procurement authority for space for the Air Force, of multiple procurement entities for the Army, for the Navy in San Diego, Army in Alabama. So with the current administration's preaching of Space Force, there's a lot of questions and ambiguity about how that will consolidate the current assets and infrastructure that supports that. Politics aside, Southern California continues to be the hotbed of how traditional industry is working with the innovators. So we think there's an incredible opportunity to work closely with the Air Force, and in particular SMC, which is the Space and Missile Systems Center, which is Air Force Base here, has acknowledged that, and they've gone through a major reorganization. They've recently announced a big new restructuring with a very senior executive from DC who's come in to take that new partnerships effort to support MilSatCom, which is working with foreign countries for looking at the military-industrial relationships we have around the world, as well as how can we work with them in Aerospace Corp to continue to champion and bringing those opportunities here together for them. So SMC, Vandenberg are two incredible places that have demonstrated that there is talent, not from just traditional industry, that the barriers to entry are being lowered, and we will continue to work closely with them. They've partly sponsored one of our accelerators, which is a 13-week boot camp accelerator that will happen starting next summer. We're still looking for a new home to house them. So we're getting ready to kind of gear up for that, in addition to some of the other things we discussed. So it is a very politically sensitive topic, but we are doing everything we can, and I spend a lot of time in DC to continue to help all the various stakeholders understand just how compelling that intersection is here in Southern California with SMC.
Thanks, Van. A couple points. $1.8 billion economic impact, that's SMC. Directly employing over 5,000 people and indirectly creating nearly 12,000 jobs. So certainly a multiplier effect. We all know that. We all have aerospace in our backyards. So it's vital, and we'll continue to work together regionally on that. Mike, I'm going to end with you before I turn it over a couple questions. So you said California is a tough place to do business. So what are the 3 things that cities or the state could do to make it easier to do business in California?
Yeah, I think from a tax perspective, as simplified as possible, I think getting businesses started, making that really easy, that ramping and starting those early, big businesses all started really small, and I think you really want an ecosystem that encourages small business. I think El Segundo's done a good job of diversifying away from the image of just being these enormous corporations, and it's super attractive, and I start hearing that more often. And then I think the third thing is just making sure you have amenities that the workforce that you're trying to attract through these companies want, right? And so, whether that's restaurants and places to live and transportation, parking is a major issue in a lot of cities. Like, these are material things that actually affect whether or not somebody wants to accept a job at Textile or 5 other really great places to work. And being aware of those decision-making criteria by cities, I think will allow them to help prioritize initiatives in those towns.
Thanks. Anyone else from the panel have anything else to add on what we can do better as cities to entice entrepreneurship?
Keep coming to our events in different parts of the country.
Will do.
Well, I think it's more of the same. So this flexibility that has come up here. So for us, we move at lightning speed, and a week is sometimes feels like for other people maybe a quarter or half a year. And so the flexibility that we have here with all of our expansions, we do photo shoots and video shoots and all these things in our facility where we need a lot of flexibility from the city to support us when we need it, and we need it tomorrow, and it always works. So I think that's the biggest one. The moment you said it, like we would be stopped in any of that, we would immediately go, oh, well, maybe we're not in the right place. And we never have to, because you guys are excellent.
Thank you, sir. Anything else to add, Luke or Tim?
Keep helping us grow. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Would love to. All right, great. We'll do that.
I think the one I would add is, we all run, this is not an issue with El Segundo, this is everywhere. When we onboard new employees, and Mayor Garcetti, this is one we could use your help, it's affordable housing for the young people. We onboard new employees, and the growth of El Segundo, as everyone talks, we want to live local. We want to live near where we work, and we onboard new employees, and they struggle to find a place that they can afford to live.
Right.
So they're pushed east. And then what happens, they're pushed east, and so they're either stuck on the freeway or they're taking mass transit to get to work. But it's an hour and 15, hour and a half door to door. So by the time they arrive, they're a little bit spent. And then by the time they get home, their day has been extended. And so the challenge we get every time we hire a new employee is I'm staying with a relative out in Arcadia until I can find a place to live, and it's taxing, and it's something we're going to all have to figure out.
Thanks, Tim. And I know Mayor's been working on a lot of initiatives in that, and so is Sacramento. Some we like, some not so much, but we're certainly all dealing. We just had this come up in the city council dais Tuesday night, right, folks? I mean, we were talking about this very thing. Is there an opportunity to get denser? Our challenge is we have a square mile of residential to deal with. And we have this nice divide that keeps PCH separated from the commercial, most commercial. And the other interesting thing is there's another school district that's in our boundaries that makes things complicated. And additionally, based on Prop 13, we get very little of that LA County property tax, like 6 points, where I think Manhattan Beach gets 12, 13. So it's in our, you can just, Steve, just, you know, you're in charge now, man. Just bring some of us.
Network.
So we have to focus on commercial. For our town, 95% plus of our general fund revenue is from commercial, directly or indirectly. There are very few cities in LA County that can say that same thing. That's massive for us. So any quick questions? I know we're a little bit behind. Yes, sir. Tom.
I'd like to follow up on exactly what you guys were just talking about. I think just a few weeks ago, Mayor Garcetti and I signed a pledge with the Annenberg Foundation and with the venture capital community in Los Angeles and Culver City to increase inclusion, to increase equity in all of, in their hiring, in all of their operations. So my question is, how much do you guys think about that, and how can we approach you really to partner with us on doing these things that we absolutely need to do if both business and the quality of life is going to thrive? How can we talk to you about helping us with housing and with mobility, with traffic? You see these partnerships in small cities, around the country, throughout the Midwest. The James Fallows book, Our Towns, goes into that deeply. How can we do that with you engines of prosperity here in Los Angeles?
Can I go first? Mayor Garcetti, earlier you talked about the sort of the accountability of the mayor. I'm a big believer of If Mayors Ruled the World. I love that book. And one of the things we're working very closely with Mayor Garcetti's office, as well as some of the other cities in LA County, is partnering with the federal agencies to not make radical ideas that radical anymore. So concepts like urban aerial mobility are not that far-fetched. The technology exists, and we are working very closely, whether it's hosting the Uber Elevate conference, or working with the CoMotion conference that was organized just a few weeks ago, to make sure that we're giving those innovators a chance. With regards to equality, we certainly believe, Francois and I definitely hold that true to ourselves. In aerospace industry in particular, it's hard to find that, and we try to find a gender equality of 50-50 in our entire organization. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sorry, Eric, you won't be coming to South by Southwest. So one of the requirements was that we have to have a female panelist, and so we brought Salita instead. Yeah. So we're definitely big proponents of Pledge LA's program, and we want to continue to support that.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Tom. Yes, Bill.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you, Mayor Boyles, and Mayor Garcetti for putting this on. It's very timely, and it's fantastic. I want to point out an area we have in Redondo Beach, which is 4 miles from here. It's called the South Bay Galleria, and it's under a big redevelopment plan. QIC bought it. They're looking at building 1.6 million square feet of a combination of retail, office, residential, hotel. They're in the process of planning that. I've spoken with them closely, and it's obvious that they're a little bit, trying to figure all this out about what you guys are talking about, the type of mix that they want to have. And so it's coming to us. It's in the phase right now. I'm going to get all your cards. I already got vans. And the community's looking for more of a commercial component. While they're traditional retail mall developers, it's clear when you factor in the various quality of life, the traffic, which I mentioned earlier, 93% of Redondo Beach residents leave Redondo to go to work. We need to reverse some of that flow, take some of the pressure off of the transportation infrastructure. We're talking about an affordable component. Right now, they're only allowing for about 10%. We're putting the screws to them. But mostly, I don't really have a question, but
just pitching Redondo. I love it.
You even answered some questions I didn't know I had, and so thank you for putting this on, and I'll be talking.
Thanks,
to you later.
Bill. I think it's really interesting what's happening at that property, and I just met with a company recently who's taking vacant malls. There's abundance of malls, right?
Yeah.
And they're converting them to action sports arenas inside. So there's so much, I think, that's going to be an innovation that's going to be happening within these big boxes as well. I think that's all we have, so I just want to thank you all. I think we're going to do a quick photo, Eric, if you don't mind, with the panels right here. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Two last pieces of business. We always ask you to fill out a survey. if you want to host, if you have an idea, and some feedback on the panels from today as well. And we're open to where we will go next time. Gail Koretz is a great point of contact for you and or your team in your respective cities to interface as well. Real quick, just like 2 minutes. I know there's a couple mayors who asked just to make an announcement or two. Billy, you want to start? You just want to say something?
How many of you know what 827 was? SB 827. It was a Senate bill floated by the state legislature about a year ago to basically take over local zoning in your communities. If you were next to a high-quality transit corridor, high-quality bus stop, you were not, your local control over zoning for residential was going to be eliminated in essence. There were going to be no density limits, right? No minimum parking requirements. Height limits were set at 55 feet. And ultimately, your ability to control what happens in your town is going to be eliminated. And it's all based on, of course, the housing shortage, affordability crisis. And I know that many elected officials around the whole state who really understand this and have seen the state coming at them with these sorts of laws are none too happy. So I'm meeting with, so there's a new bill, not SB 827, it's now called SB 50. It's going to be floated again this year. SB 27 was voted down. There's a tremendous amount of opposition, as well as Mayor Garcetti, which I really appreciate. Because we just feel that this broad brush, one size fits all being spread around the state is wholly inappropriate and really not sensitive to what we know in our own local communities and what is best for our local communities in terms of further development. Redondo Beach, from Redondo Beach, we got 11,000 residents per square mile. We have a lot of challenges on adding residential. We're trying to get inclusionary zoning. We've got a big project coming. As you guys all know, everybody's got their own individual issues. So SB 50 is coming, and our response, I'm meeting with some elected officials from Northern California this afternoon, and we're working on a statewide initiative to amend the Constitution to enshrine local control over local zoning so that all these laws that are coming from Sacramento that would have very specific, it's very detailed. You read SB 50, it's very complex, and it's dial turning up in Sacramento. It's really going to hurt our community. So we think, Sacramento should be leaving those challenges to us. And so depending on the kind of support we get statewide, you may be hearing about an initiative to amend the Constitution, because this isn't going to come from Sacramento, right? Sacramento is not going to do this. Sacramento has their own ideas about how we should be zoning our own towns. So it is going to have to be an initiative. It is going to have to be an amendment to the Constitution. So you may be hearing about this going forward, depending on how much support we get statewide. But I really think the more local elected officials learn about this, the more they're going to support what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to get on the radar screen, and there may be some huge signature drive coming. I've talked to people all the way from Peter Ubroff down to the most active activists in our town, and it's getting a lot of support. So we'll see. To be continued. Thank you for.
Thank you, Bill. No, appreciate it. Any other announcements or things to share with fellow mayors and council members that are here? All right, we'll fill out those surveys. We're going to do, I think, a group picture like we usually do, or we have time? And yeah, before that, I want to say this. Drew is going to come and say a final goodbye. Want to say anything? There you go. And thank you again to El Segundo for superb hosting.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. I want to thank the staff. Thank you to Chief Whalen and Chief Donovan Fire. Thank you to the other staff members for putting on an incredible event. And thank you. I know it's a busy time of year. Everybody's got the holidays that they're dealing with right now. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here and sharing. I learned a ton. The fire presentation was great. That debrief, the earthquake. I mean, everything was great. I learned a lot from our panelists, too, on the economic development front. So thank you, Mayor, for putting these together. I look forward to the next one. Thank you all. So we're going to go to the lobby, right, Gail? Oh, yes, thanks, Mashia. Oh, and thank you, Mashia, for helping out on all fronts. Great job, Mashia Jennings. So, Mayor, we have a gift for you, a token of our appreciation from the city of El Segundo. I think do we have a pint glass in there? If not, we need to include one, because obviously he's an El Segundo Brewing fan. So there you go.
To the El Segundo Times?
Yeah, subscription to the El Segundo Times. You got it. All right, thank you, Mayor, again. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay.